So to get started, let's talk a little bit about the limitations of traditional pen testing. We all have heard of it before. We all know it. Anyone who joined this webinar knows what traditional penetration testing is. Typically, if you're hiring an outside firm, it's annual, ad hoc, maybe quarterly at best. But with that leaves a lot to be desired. So you find an issue, you fix it, you might retest it, but that takes weeks of time. There's a lot of gaps within that strategy, and it also costs a lot of money, and it's very cumbersome. So how do we get to a point where testing can happen on a continuous basis? You can find, fix, and verify very quickly. And that's kind of the stage that we are in. And Kevin, I know you've been in this space for quite some time now. Anything to add there?
Absolutely. I'm thinking of a couple of different times when, I came into a situation where there was a lot of pen test results and a lot of work to be done, months and months worth of work after an annual pen test. And it didn't make sense to me. And that was at the beginning of my career. And we were able to transform that into a continual process to where audits and the annual tick box pen test weren't so obtrusive to the business.
Right. And so here's just a comparison of where Ridgebot is today versus the periodic testing that was in the past. And you can see that old computer screen. It's very high cost, resource intensive. You need a lot of resources to actually pull this off on a continuous basis. Enter AI, enter machine learning. That's where Ridgebot stands today. It is tireless. You can launch thousands of jobs at your targets to identify vulnerabilities and exploit vulnerabilities on a continuous basis.
And obviously deliver validated results instead of long reports filled with false positives and extra work for the team that's already overworked.
That's right. So just to go into a little bit of the methodology, and Kevin will show you this later, we're going to show a quick demo of how Ridgebot actually operates. But what Ridgebot does is, using its AI engine, thinking like a hacker, it's going to discover all of your assets, fingerprint the assets, whether those are websites, IP hosts, etc. It's going to identify vulnerabilities, and once it does, it will try to exploit those vulnerabilities, then try to move laterally. And this is not a singular instance. This happens over and over again until Ridgebot has exhausted all options. Kevin, I don't know if you wanted to comment on that.
Right. With the intelligent automated workflow, we go through that asset discovery, identifying hosts, operating systems, applications, network devices. Then we start to mine vulnerabilities using a massive exploit and attack library. We attempt real exploitation with proof of concept payloads. Finally, if we're successful, we perform lateral movement. See how deep an attacker can get into the network or across a VLAN or a firewall within the network. And then we can replicate that and do it again and again and replicate that adversarial behavior.
Thanks, Kevin. And I might add that if anyone has any questions, please drop them into the chat or the Q&A section. We'll be happy to answer those as soon as possible. So there's a few types of tests that Ridgebot does. And Kevin, I don't know if you wanted to speak to this. You're probably best off doing that.
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely. So, the methodology is to test the perimeter, test from inside, different types of or layers of credentials or permissions, and look at that from multiple attack perspectives, because you have to know where those weaknesses is. Ridgebot can simulate an external attacker with no credentials, run authenticated tests to understand risk after an initial compromise. And again, we can perform that lateral movement across network segments to uncover hidden pathways, which a vulnerability scan's not going to find.
Thanks, Kevin. And here's just an example of what a kill chain analysis would look like. I again, Kevin, I think you're the best to speak to this,
Yeah,
but let's start with stage 1, 2, and 3 here.
absolutely. And, Ridgebot in early stages, as it discovers an exposed service, exploits that vulnerability to gain a foothold, then tries to escalate privileges, and if successful, will try that lateral movement. These stages all map to real kill chain and help teams understand kind of how the attacker would progress through this.
Yep. And then stage 4 through 7, I think you spoke to stage 5
Yeah,
already, Kevin.
absolutely.
Yep.
Ridgebot will deploy a lightweight component to enable pivoting. It self-destructs, moves laterally through the network, locates sensitive assets, compromises credentials, and ultimately, with SQL injections, can reach databases, and then with this completes the kill chain, and we provide full visibility into that and to the compromise and impact of it.
Thanks, Kevin. And I know you were part of a SOC in your previous life, but
Right.
Ridgebot can stand alone on its own and operate independently from anything else you're doing, identifying vulnerabilities, exploiting vulnerabilities, helping you create that prioritization list, right? But also it integrates with existing vulnerability scanners. To your point, Kevin, sometimes those can get noisy. You don't know what you should prioritize. Ridgebot integrates with some of the big three, Rapid7, Tenable, Qualys, to give you that short list of vulnerabilities that are actually exploitable. And again, it's really narrowing down on what's exploitable versus what is not. And Kevin, please explain your experience with your previous life.
Yeah. Absolutely. I, especially in fintech, I would have definitely used Ridgebot due to the audit and pen test nature of the regulations we had to follow. And Ridgebot integrates directly into SOC workflows to where the AI engines help filter out the noise so your blue team, your purple team, your red team can focus on high risk issues. We can generate reports in real time and then integrate, like Dennis pointed out, with systems like Rapid7, Qualys, Tenable, so that we can keep the blue team in their tool and keep the SOC in their tools and provide that overview, that prioritization, that risk mapping in the environment. We can do this continuous and have that validation as part of the day-to-day operations with these workflows.
Thanks, Kevin. So I guess, can we expand on that as far as it's continuous validation? We're reducing the time it takes to remediate vulnerabilities. We're showing the folks that need to fix these issues where they need to point their arrow to. We're automating reporting. You're seeing this on a continuous basis, and you're able to generate these reports for a compliance need as well.
Right. And beyond testing, as Dennis alluded to, Ridgebot accelerates remediation. Once patches are applied, Ridgebot can automatically retest to verify that they are truly fixed and that the remediation has worked. We reduce mean time to remediation dramatically and produce compliance-ready evidence for audits.
And so we look at ROI, cost reduction, right? We're using machines, not humans. That's an easy win for all folks in discussion. Expanded coverage. You're not just looking at a piece of your network or infrastructure or a small segment of it. Again, Ridgebot is going to be able to crawl your entire infrastructure, websites, web applications, APIs, what have you. And it's going to get there faster because it's, again, AI powered and machine learning enabled. Anything to add there, Kevin?
Yeah, continuous coverage replaces one-time snapshots. Vulnerabilities are found, exploits are found within days, not months. And the overall goal is that is to shrink that exposure window in the environment, in the enterprise.
And going forward, we talked about this previously, but identifying risk. what is a real threat in our environment, RidgeBot will be able to identify that quickly. Tool stack optimization. We can find out if our Microsoft Defender is doing its job, our EDR solutions is doing its job, is our data loss prevention tool doing its job. Cyber insurance, this helps with satisfying those needs. And then again, and everyone knows this, but it's helping prevent breaches by being proactive, offensively identifying issues before someone bad does that for you.
Right. And, knowing where the issues are and where the weaknesses are in your security controls, across EDR, XDR, endpoint, data loss prevention, and Active Directory helps you shore things up from the inside, as well as looking at that posture from the external facing network and also internal, and what that exposure looks like and where those exploits are. It truly gives the vulnerability and risk management team their true marching orders, their priority list.
Right. And so why does RidgeBot stand out? We're not dropping agents into your environment. You can be confident that if RidgeBot exploits anything, it's a zero false positive. So that gives you, again, that short list. We continuously update our library of plugins, which is what RidgeBot leverages during its exploits. And it has 2 AI engines going on 3. Kevin, I don't know if you wanted to speak to a few of those points there.
There's so much agent fatigue in the world. I experienced it. My admin team would go, good grief, not another agent. I mean, literally all the time. RidgeBot's value comes from its agentless architecture. Its reliable zero false positive approach through payload-based validation, the huge exploit coverage that we offer, the dual AI engine with RidgeBrain and Ridge Intelligence to add context to the exploits and the proof of concepts. This combination makes RidgeBot uniquely effective in simulating real attackers safely in your enterprise.
So here's a real world use case, and one of the pieces of RidgeBot is identifying APT groups that exploit vulnerability chains for domain compromise. And Kevin, I think you're the best person to kind of explain how that would work.
And I'll cover this in the demo in a few minutes as well. RidgeBot has 2 different scenarios focused on advanced persistent threat groups, their tactics, techniques, procedures. And so you can be ahead of the game as far as ransomware and what the risk is to the environment. They chain together multiple vulnerabilities to gain control, with RidgeBot set continuously testing the environment for ransomware and those groups, those exact attack paths, the TTPs in real deployment. We're shifting from reactive incident response to proactive prevention with this type of tactic.
Right. And so before I hand it off to you, Kevin, and this kind of nails the point home, but periodic testing has blind spots because continuous is essential. That basically means you can use RidgeBot on a continuous basis, identify risks as many times as you'd like versus, the traditional approach. We're automating the entire attack surface, so not just looking at subsegments. We're integrating it to your SOC team's workflow, and you're getting measurable savings as a result.
Yeah, and with RidgeBot, we turn security validation into an ongoing process and workflow rather than a once-a-year event.
Right. Well, that's it for the slides, Kevin. I guess I can hand it over to you to show. Everyone's probably wondering how RidgeBot would look like in practice, so I'll hand it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. Let me share my screen. And I'm going to walk through just what a couple of different workflows would look like in an enterprise situation, covering attack surface, ransomware, and some different things. So you can see that within Ridgebot, we bring you into the task section. It's where we do most of the work. We can create new pen test tasks, look at scheduled or running tasks or finished tasks, and do reporting, things to that nature. You can see here, I do have a pre-scheduled ransomware pen test set up. I've got that scheduled, so that's going to run twice a week on Sundays and Thursdays. So I missed it today. It's going to run again Sunday. So I'm going to get a continuous look at the targets in scope and what my ransomware footprint is. So let me kick off an attack surface and kind of start at the beginning. So I'm going to create a new task, and I'm going to go grab my scenario, which are my pen testing use cases, and I'm going to grab my attack surface identification. I am going to give it a good name. And I'll put my subnet in there. I can import a CSV file for those subnets from the asset table if I've already ran a scan, but I'm just going to put that in there singularly. Again, I can run this ad hoc on demand. I can run it once, schedule it to run once. If I'm looking to see what my attack surface looks like on a weekly basis, Sundays and Wednesdays for workstations, websites, server VLANs, what have you, or subnets. But I'm going to run this one now. I'm going to leave that set to normal. I can adjust some other parameters within this. I'm going to look for all ports versus just TCP. And now I am ready to go to start my attack surface scan across on my new subnet. All right. And that's going to start going through that discovery process that we spoke of earlier on the slideshow of mapping those assets, those ports, those services tied to the ports, which applications are tied in there, and that on fully qualified domain or web surface attack, we're going to crawl the subdomains, show you what the site and a web URL attack surface looks like on that before we start pen testing and looking for risk in the environment. Let's look at this previously ran attack surface. So across this subnet, 256, but I only had 49 alive targets. I had an attack surface across those targets of 3,324. I can jump to differing details. If I look at my task summary, I can see that attack surface. If I jump over here, I can see what my ports, what my sites, what my URL attack surface is across this subnet. I can see the services and applications that they're tied to along with the port, any sites hosted on these targets, their language, framework, any WAF or CDN types, and then my URL attack surface across this subnet. I may not know that there's any websites even hosted on these IP addresses. Now I do. And I can set that up on a continual basis and also report on that and have that delivered to either the web or the infrastructure or security teams to map that attack surface across the enterprise, not rely on agent deployments, to make sure that we're seeing where our assets are in the environment or where our web attack surface is as well. Let me start a ransomware scenario real quick. I am going to, again, create a new task, choose my specific scenario of what I'm wanting to pen test. So I'm wanting to pen test 2 assets for ransomware. And I'll put my 2 hosts in there. Again, I can bring them in on a CSV file. If I've scanned them from a previous attack surface, I can import them from my assets or my host table. I'm just going to run it now, leave it steady. Here's where we can connect to DevSecOps. I did fail to point that out. Again, these are the SOC and the development workflows we can connect to: Jira on-prem, Jira Cloud, ServiceNow, and GitLab to create tickets, projects, or cases based on the findings in the pen testing. Again, we can do email notification out as well. Information recon, again, I'm going to look for all ports. That's just the kind of guy I am. On exploitation, I'm going to let RidgeBot do its thing because I want to know where my exposure is to ransomware. So I'm going to let RidgeBot do its thing. But very quickly, a few mouse clicks, a few minutes, and I can have either an ad hoc or a recurring continuous threat exposure look at my ransomware exposure within my environment. So in looking at a previously run scenario on ransomware, I can see that I've got issues. Red, skull and crossbones is never good. Of my 2 total targets, both of them are alive. I have 358 attack surfaces and 13 attack paths. If I look at my topology, I can see very quickly, okay, yeah, I've got some issues on this. I've got exposure to ransomware exploit in my environment. Polkit, privilege escalation, SSH, SMB, leaking information to the public. Again, SSH. But I see that full attack path all the way back to IP and all the way out to any attack surfaces and any issues or vulnerabilities. I can also look at very quickly my kill chain analysis of what's going on and what RidgeBot actually did to exploit this. I found my target, attack surface of 22, found the vulnerability, was able to exploit it and grab the user and the host shell. Same goes with the Polkit escalation or exploitation. Found 22, found SSH password vulnerability, exploited Polkit, gained remote code, remote command execution. So very quickly, I can get to the bottom of what's going on in the environment from that risk perspective. I can see here that RidgeBot ran a little over 6,300 pen test tasks or jobs against these 2 assets. Found an attack surface of 358, 4 active sites, 2 compromised assets, 41 vulnerabilities, and RidgeBot was able to actually exploit with proof 13 of them. If I look at my attack surface, I see all of my open ports, the services and applications tied to those ports, and then any URLs across these 2 assets. If I go to my vulnerability table, I see my exploitable risk first, but I also get full remediation and mitigation advice against anything that RidgeBot was able to find. If we look at the risk table, we've got credential disclosures. My developer left a test account on SSH on one of our servers. I've got Polkit, remote code execution with evidence. RidgeBot was able to invoke the CLI and institute commands, leaking server information to the public. So very quickly, I can get these set up, look at specific parts of the network or the enterprise, do them on a recurring basis so that they're scheduled, and then see the reporting across that on a regular basis. And I'm going to show one more scenario or pen test task that looks at lateral movement and how RidgeBot is able to exploit that. And I will go into and show what the configuration actually kind of look like for this. So I set up a host penetration test. I'm looking at a single asset, but I'm actually looking for 6 targets. On my information recon, I left it alone. For my exploitation, I left that alone as well. My post-exploitation, I altered my lateral movement depth and I put in a lateral movement range for RidgeBot to try to exploit. One range of this asset is across the firewall and should not be accessible by the main asset. As you can see here, we weren't able to exploit one of the hosts, but we were the others. If I go to the attack topology, it gets evident very quickly on what's going on and how RidgeBot was able to exploit this. I've got number one, a very large attack surface. So let me make this a little bit smaller. So my main IP found the target, found an attack surface, found web logic, was able to exploit web logic, found a new network, and then was able to gain access to 3 other targets, and then also to exploit them. And I get that full kill chain analysis and attack surface all the way back to my main IP. The other section of this is through this particular target, we were able to go across a VLAN or firewall and gain access to another network, and then compromise this one asset, not the other one, but we did get full lateral movement across 3 assets and 2 network segments with this test. I can also see the very long kill chain analysis of how RidgeBot was able to do this. I apologize for that. With my initial target, start working the attack surface, exploiting, looking for other networks, exploiting targets on the other networks, and then so on and so forth across 2 network segments to gain access and exploit 3 different targets within this pen test. And again, we can set that up on a recurring basis, report on it, and give you that full overall enterprise view of the risk in the environment across network, IP, host, virtual, internal, external, web, and API, and also look at security controls around endpoint, data exfiltration, and Active Directory reconnaissance and exfiltration or infiltration.
So
And
Kevin,
Dennis,
before we go back to Q&A, we did have one so far relating to RidgeBot's exploitation. Can it provide or create log and security appliance reports in order to stimulate a SOC/blue team training response, similar to red team engagement?
I believe through the ticketing integration, or if you have a ticketing system that would allow for opening of tickets through email, you could set, I would say, a test scenario up on a certain set of assets and work that as a blue-purple team exercise with RidgeBot. I could see that being a workflow, yeah. Did that answer the question?
On my end, I think it did, Kevin.
Okay.
Well, we have another one, actually.
Okay.
Let's see. Will we get a copy of the slide deck? Yes, we can, for sure. Any other questions from the audience today? All right. Well, here we go. Wait, we have one more. How is it possible to get 0 false positives, Kevin?
So one way RidgeBot does that is we use proof of concept payloads and exploits, and then we provide that proof of exploit within RidgeBot. As in that poll kit exploitation I showed you, we captured evidence of RidgeBot entering CLI commands and running commands on that target.
Thank you, Kevin. And then we have another one here. If multiple exploits are discovered during lateral movement attempts, how does it decide which to utilize? And does it take into consideration destructive risk in use of those exploits?
The short answer is yes. Through RidgeBrain, which is one of the AI machine learning models, it does these in iterative fashion, so more of a step-by-step look. As it finds more exploits and different avenues, it will try them and it will chain them together. What
Thanks,
was the
Kevin.
last part of the question? I'm sorry. There was one last piece. I don't know that I answered it.
Does it take into consideration the destructive risk in use of the exploits?
It does. So the RidgeBot plugins are set in two categories, and there are tens of thousands of plugins within RidgeBot. They're set as possible impact or no impact. You can turn this on within the testing task and set it to no impact, which then lowers the quality of the pen test. And it's not a thorough pen test, but it's also a safe pen test in the environment. So there are several guardrails. We can also introduce user interaction into the testing as well.
Thanks,
I just
Kevin.
saw another one pop up.
Yeah. And then one question, I think you already covered this, but does the platform provide any remedial advisory?
Absolutely. In the reporting, and actually we have enough time. Let me show one of the reports real quick since I'm still sharing. I'll show the ransomware report very quickly. We offer full remediation and mitigation advice within RidgeBot and also within the reporting. You see here where my task name became my report name, date and timestamp of the test, legal documentation, and then start of my executive summary. Talks about scoring, the methodology behind the scoring, all of the vulnerabilities, successful exploits, number of attack surfaces, exploits by type, and then my business risk summary. This is my prioritization list right here. Fix this yesterday. Then I get a testing configuration. If I do an executive report, it ends here, but then I get into the asset details, the fingerprinting, my attack surface, my port layout, and then into my risk detail, my kill chain analysis, my description, the solution, and then on to the next one. Broken access, leaking server information, solution, kill chain analysis, weak password, so on and so forth. So yeah, we do offer that full mitigation and remediation advice, and then also show that what that attack surface looks like at the bottom of the report after the end of the vulnerability remediation advice.
Thanks,
So
Kevin.
good question.
We also had a couple more pop up here. Does
Sure.
the platform have the capability of performing identity attacks like a weak password or with password dictionaries? Which I believe the answer is yes.
It is.
And we haven't covered that here today.
We haven't. And that's a great question. So good segue. So RidgeBot offers a very full and rich dictionary library. We can if you're a DB2 shop, we can look at FTP, Microsoft SQL, web login, username and password. So I can go in, if I've got a simple web login, I can go in and put my credentials in here along with passwords. I've got a max of 1,000 entries, but you can see here, I can upload them by file as well. ESXi, so we can look at multiple applications as far as login and password. And then at the bottom, we also have multiple API and then the URL burst library as well. Good question. I like that one. We
Thanks,
don't
Kevin.
talk about the dictionaries enough.
Thanks, Kevin. Another one would be, as we see in the poll kit, RidgeBot was able to run the command. Can we as users get shell access directly through RidgeBot on the exploited machine, or do we have to manually exploit it to get a shell?
I think I have one that might still be open. I don't know. Let me look here. Okay, nope, not that one. There is one in here. Let me see. Let me look at this one real quick. Let's see. Right here. So RidgeBot does keep a shell connection open for an amount of time, but it does, and you can run several commands, but if the shell connection's not open, it won't grab any commands, and we do auto close that. So you can have access to it for a certain amount of time after the pen test task has completed.
And then another one here, Kevin, thank you. How do you prevent malactors or script kiddies from using this tool? And I think I can answer that. You have to be a licensed user of RidgeBot in order to access this technology. But Kevin, I'll let you comment further.
Yeah, that's just it. We're very particular about who we sell RidgeBot to. I mean, we don't just sell it to anybody. You cannot just download the software off the internet. And we take security very seriously. RidgeBot is a very hardened OS, and it fits well within the enterprise, internally and externally.
And it's deployed on premise. One thing to note.
Yes, on premise or in your public cloud if needed.
And then one other one, Kevin. How does RidgeBot stand out to similar tools like Expo?
So we did do a comparison, a bake-off with a certain set of web tactics, techniques, things to that nature. And we actually scored a little bit better with Expo with our new agentic AI engine that's not in the tool today. We do very well because of the way that we crawl, the way that we have split our crawling into dynamic and static based on the framework that the website's written in, what type of website it is. And then we expand that through our API testing with Open API or GraphQL APIs. So we kind of give a more deeper coverage than a lot of our competitors do in this space.
Thank you. And then another one on that topic. How do we differ from Pentera?
Go ahead, Dennis. I think you've got
No, that's it. That's all I had. Yep.
Okay. So two main ways. Number one, RidgeBot is an on-premise tool. It is a self-contained offensive security platform that you deploy within your enterprise. Pentera is a SaaS-based solution that is, I believe, agent-based, if I'm not mistaken. The other differentiator is that with RidgeBot, you can do web testing, API testing, and also breach and attack simulations to look at those security controls, which Pentera does not offer today. So RidgeBot is a more holistic security or offensive security tool than I would say our competitors are.
Thanks, Kevin. Any other questions from the group? Going once, going twice. Okay. Wait, here we go. Well, I'm sorry. We got one last one.
Okay.
Oh, it was just from our friend Alan. Will there be a recording? Yes, Alan, for sure. I think we're done here. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's webinar. I hope everyone has a great holiday season, and we look forward to seeing you all in the next one.
Thank you all for your time today. It was a pleasure.
Thanks.